Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe. I am joined today by Kennington Lloyd Smith, my Hawkeye reporting counterpart at the Des Moines Register. Kenny, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. I'm a big fan of Hawk Off the Press. This is my second time being on the show, so I'm honored. I was honored the first time. I'm honored to be invited for a second time. I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Well, hopefully I can one-up Leah on the questions I threw out you there. So before we get into football stuff, which there's plenty of, got an important question for you ahead of this colder weather starting to get here.
Oh,
you know where this is coming, or where this is going already.
I do.
Did you finally buy an ice scraper?
Yes, I did. I got it on Amazon. I saw it was like one of those, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like long. It has like a brush type thing on one side and the scraper.
Oh, that's a must.
Like you have to it's one of those like two hands, like real elbow grease, like all of that type stuff. So I saw it immediately on my Twitter timeline on like one of those like flash deal pages and bought it immediately. So on the way. So looking forward to that. I know I have to probably buy some more things, but when I come to the game on Saturday, I'll show you the ice scraper that I had originally coming from Georgia. It's literally that small. It will like fit in the smallest pocket of my book bag. It's really sad. So we'll have a good laugh about that for sure.
Well, that's good because sooner or later we'll have the like inch thick ice. The worst is when like you don't touch your car for, well, not quite inch thick. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I don't want to scare you too much here, but the like really thick ice when you don't like touch your car for a while, like that's, yeah. Good thing you don't have the pocket size ice scraper anymore. Right.
Well, thankfully I have a garage where I live. So I'm sure that will help some. I don't know if like snow or whatever like can infiltrate small garages. Well, we'll see what happens. I've only seen like 5 inches of snow in my entire life. So
it's wow.
It's gonna be crazy when it starts snowing for real.
Well, the good news is I don't think the snow is gonna infiltrate the garage. So
okay,
that's
good to know.
That's the silver lining there. You will have more than 5 inches in one day though. So get excited for that.
Right. Hopefully those days are few and far between.
And hopefully not Tuesdays or Saturdays.
Right, 100%. I'm liking this good energy. I feel like we're getting off to a really good start today with these affirmations. Let's keep them going.
All right. Well, going now into football, and as much as I could talk about Midwest weather as like the most stereotypical Midwesterner, biggest storyline going into this game seems to be Alex Padilla seems to be the starting quarterback unless something crazy happens. It wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden Ferentz pulls kind of a little bit of a rabbit out of his hat. But as of right now, it looks like it's Padilla time in Iowa City.
Right. I think that there is some aspect of kind of some gamesmanship with Kirk Ferentz and how he's talking about Petrus. I think, and I mean, this common across all sports, really. One of your important players gets hurt and reporters or fans are asking if he's going to play, not going to play. And the coach says something vague, it's day to day, or we're monitoring it closely. We'll see. We feel good about it. Just to kind of throw out something else for PJ Fleck in Minnesota to prepare for or keep an eye out on. So I think that's a part of it. But personally, from what I saw at the Northwestern game, you were sitting right beside me. It just looked like his shoulder is going to take a little bit longer than a week to be able to throw at the velocity that they really want to see it at in order to be successful. So the way that I was looking at it is at this point in the season, especially when you're in a 4-way tie and every single game is important, we're kind of looking at every game as a 1 week season, because if you don't win Saturday, then everything else afterwards isn't going to matter in terms of the Big Ten West race. So you kind of owe it to the team, owe it to yourself to do what is going to make you the most successful. And that's riding with Padilla, who's the healthiest option, the most experienced option. And he actually played really well against Northwestern, considering the circumstances coming in cold, throwing the ball 28 times, which I think shows a lot of trust. So they have a viable option. We've seen what he's able to do. So it makes sense to kind of roll with Padilla. I think the interesting question is, let's say he has another great game against Minnesota, they win. That's when I think we're really going to have to start, really entertaining the thought of him being the permanent starter at quarterback.
And I think the other thing too is it isn't like Petrus was underthrowing these deep 40-yard passes. He was underthrowing some pretty normal, regular short passes where
Right.
if you're underthrowing it by that much for those routes, yeah, there's a long ways to go before you're going to be the healthy number one starting quarterback. So, I'm not a medical expert, but so maybe a miracle happens, but I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath for that one.
Right. There was two plays really stick out that kind of, I think, illustrate where he's at with his health. The first one, I think, was his last play before Padilla took over against Wisconsin, where he sailed one over Keegan Johnson's head. And we didn't know if that was maybe a miscommunication or it was something health-wise. And then coming out against Northwestern, another pass to Keegan Johnson where he just shorted it on kind of like an out route. It was a very simple, like you said, like a 5-6 yard pass, and he just kind of threw it in the dirt. And that was when it was, I think, pretty apparent to everybody that he wasn't at full strength. So we'll see how long it takes for him to get healthy. Shoulder injuries are nothing to play with. We see that, especially in the NFL. You look at Dak Prescott, what he went through in training camp, dealing with his shoulder injury and what it took for him to come back. So we don't know the severity of it. I imagine it's somewhat serious stuff. He's going to miss multiple games. So that's just something that we're going to have to keep an eye out on. But looks like Padilla is the man. He was rolling. I was really impressed with the fact that he did a lot of his work out of the pocket and not using that element of his game that a lot of people were clamoring to for why he should be starting in the first place, was because he can escape the pocket. He can make plays with his legs. He didn't have to do that against Northwestern. Luckily, the line played very well. So the fact that he is able to play a full game from the pocket and not just have to rely on running every single time to make plays, I think is a positive sign.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising when I was watching the replay. It's like, oh, wow, it took him a while. He did eventually roll out a couple times, but I don't think I think it was just like maybe one or two plays there in the first half that he was out of the pocket, and then a little more in the second half. But that is a great point. He did the job in the pocket really well. And then it seemed like play calling wise, they just weren't really giving him the ball much. It almost seemed like they thought they had a bigger lead than they did with the way that they were just running the ball, not really in any unpredictable way, but just to kind of kill the clock. You have thought that it was a 31-point lead, not a, what was it, 11-point lead at that point?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that is a good point. I think there was just opportunities, I think, to squeeze out a few more points here, a few more points here, or so punch it here, punch it there, like really be aggressive, and they really didn't take those opportunities. I think that Kirk Ferentz said something like they felt like they had the game pretty much in hand with how well the defense was playing, so maybe they didn't feel a super need to kind of like, punch the gas. It kind of felt like throughout the game that let me start by saying this. There was never a point in the game really where I thought the Iowa was going to lose the game. I feel like they had the game pretty much in their control, but they had their foot kind of hovering over Northwestern's neck, but they never really put their foot on it until Dane Bill's interception that clinched the game. They were winning. They had the game in hand, but it just kind of felt like, a few plays here or there going the opposite way, and we could be kind of looking at a different ball game, which we saw for a very short period of time at the very end when they got the touchdown. Then Iowa 3 and outs with the 2 minutes left, they punted the ball. It's like, okay, like it's starting to get a little interesting here. So I think that in this game against Minnesota, especially, this is a significant upgrade in talent level defensively from what they're going to see against Northwestern. I think that if there's going to be opportunities maybe, let's say, end of the first half, Iowa gets the ball to start the second half. They have an opportunity to execute a 2-minute drive, maybe get a field goal, come out, get the ball second half. They have to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. Because Minnesota is a better team than Northwestern. So maybe that conservativeness and the opportunity that Northwestern had that they faltered on, Minnesota could capitalize on that. So,
and Minnesota has a lot better of a rush defense too, where Northwestern is kind of Swiss cheese when it comes to their rush defense this year. But Minnesota it's not Wisconsin level, but it's certainly a lot more formidable. So when if you're just going to go to that default, okay, kill the clock here, that might not go so well.
Right, exactly. It was, Minnesota's defense in a way is kind of like Iowa's when we're talking about an experience factor. At Big Ten Media Day, PJ Fleck spoke about having 10 returning starters coming back on defense this year. Last year, their defense took their lumps. They had a lot of young players. This year, you see a defense of players who are more experienced, who understand the system, who are trusting the system, and they're seeing those results. I believe they have the 8th ranked total defense nationally. So similar to Iowa in that regard, and that the players just kind of like that. The defense has an identity. They know what they're trying to do. It seems to be very effective. I think that the best thing for Iowa is that going up against a Northwestern team who had the last ranked rush defense in the Big Ten, at least they were able to execute in that game. I think that if they weren't able to execute in that game, they just, we barely eked out a win. The level of confidence will be a little bit different than the way that they played, averaging 5 yards per carry. So at least they have some positive momentum. They can keep it rolling. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the run game. I think that's really going to be a key, is like getting that established, keeping Padilla ahead of the sticks, and not putting him in situations that are going to be difficult for him.
And the interesting thing too is how I think everyone knew Tyler Goodson is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, if not nationally, in terms of talent. He hasn't really had a ton of open space this year. So I think people would have expected, say, a Tyler Goodson to have a good game against Northwestern. But then Gavin Williams had that nice, I think it's 41 yards on 10 carries, which certainly gets the job done as an underclassman thrown into that role. And then you have Arlen Bruce, who got the 10-yard run, who kind of seems like almost a little bit of a running back at heart still. So he seemed to enjoy getting the handoff there. So it's interesting that it's involving a few faces that maybe we wouldn't have expected to see a ton of, say, a couple months ago.
Right. That was something that I like seeing back into the fold, is those kind of like jet sweeps that we've seen with the wide receivers, those end arounds. I feel like every time we've seen that this year, and it's only been a few times, it's been successful. The first one that really comes to mind was Colorado State. Tyron Tracy took one of those around and scored. I think there was a similar play against Maryland. I can't remember who it was. I think somebody had a similar play and it was successful.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
And then we didn't see it again until really the Northwestern game where Bruce took one for a touchdown. And then on the field goal drive, Charlie Jones took one of those for a first down. It only went 6 yards, but that was a successful play. So I like that variation. I feel like they can do even more with that now that they put it on tape a few times. It's been successful every time. So I like to see that. I did like what Gavin Williams brought to the table. I think that him and Goodson's games complement each other a little bit better than Goodson and Ivory Kelly-Martin. So Ivory Kelly-Martin is a veteran. Obviously, he knows the system, but him and Goodson are pretty similar kind of in build, what they're trying to do in terms of run style. I feel like Gavin Williams is just like a straight line downhill, almost like power runner. We really haven't seen a lot of shiftiness and a lot of moves, but he just runs really hard, right into the teeth of a defense. So he described it this week as kind of like a thunder lightning dynamic between him and Goodson. So I like what they brought to the table. It seemed like parents liked it as well, like their dynamics. So I think the running game is in a good position, and it kind of has to be at this time of the year. Weather's turning. It's going to get cold. The weather's going to be a little bit more unpredictable. So you have to be able to run the ball in the final month if you're going to be, successful and potentially win a division title.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Arlen has been having a great years. Same with fellow true freshman Keegan Johnson. And you kind of wonder at the wide receiver spot if they kind of continue to take a more prominent role the longer that Padilla is under center.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's difficult, I think, for coaches because you want to honor seniority and you want to have, to put all your faith in your veterans or players who have been there. But I think
like a Tyrone Tracy.
Right, exactly. Tyrone Tracy, Nico Reganey, obviously, who has made a lot of huge plays throughout the year. But I think that it's just becoming obvious that Johnson and Bruce, with their development and what they're doing every time that they're on the field, it's like they're almost too good to take off the field. And this is a good problem to have for Iowa because at the end of the year, there was questions at wide receiver. You knew what Tracy brings to the table. He still brings those things to the table. Reganey obviously has rapport with Spencer. He's made a lot of clutch plays this year. Charlie Jones is a veteran. But after those three, you really didn't know what you had. Now that you know you have two explosive, talented freshman receivers, in addition to your veterans, you feel like you have a pretty deep receiving core of five guys who can go out there and do the job. But I think that what we're seeing is kind of like almost like a changing of the guard, with Johnson getting a lot more snaps, working exclusively kind of in like that number one receiver spot, which I think is a fit for him. Bruce is just kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You can do a lot of things with him. So I think
even being a gunner. We heard yesterday from LeVar Woods. I was thinking, man, this kid can do everything.
Right. That's what Iowa wants, just kind of like all around athletes who are just committed to just kind of helping the team in any capacity. But I think their emergence is going to force Brian Ferentz to just continue to get more creative with the play calling. Like, we have these guys, we can put them in a lot of different spaces. Let's see what we can do offensively to spring them open and to get some dominant plays. But to your point about Padilla, they've worked on the second team a lot together, those three. Johnson had 11 targets, I believe, against Northwestern.
Out of, I think, like 30 some total too. So it's a pretty good chunk there.
Right, exactly. So to see that was an encouraging sign. And it seems like we're asking about these freshmen every week. And Kirk Ferentz, very complimentary of them because he's amazed that they're progressing at this level, the same that we are. So them in the offense is a good thing for Iowa. I think the challenge is just incorporating the veterans and the young players together to really just kind of have like a diverse and dynamic attack.
Yeah, because we haven't seen a ton of Tyrone Tracy this year, which has been a little surprising considering he seemed to be the clear number one going into this season. Right. But the targets just haven't been there. You mentioned that end around play. You've seen him a little bit in the running game, kind of doing different things, but not necessarily, I think, what any Hawkeye fan really would have expected going into this season.
Right. I think, for me, especially being new on the beat, when I came in the summertime, a lot of the conversations about the offense at that point were kind of centered around Tracy and kind of the dynamic between him and the coaches of them. I don't know if I want to say having to convince him to come back, but there was a lot of conversations that were being had in the offseason between him and the coaching staff about what they were going to do about the offense, what his role was going to be. Because from what I understand, he had a really big role, true redshirt freshman year last year, different type of year. They had two receivers from the NFL now, really ran the ball with Peaches as a first-year starter. So he didn't get a chance to get those same targets. So coming into this year, it seemed Big Ten Media Days, summer availabilities, that the plan was to get him really involved. We just haven't really seen that come to fruition. I think that maybe him and Petrus, we don't know what we don't watch their practices, but maybe their connection isn't what we thought it was. Petrus seemed to be targeting Charlie Jones a lot in the beginning of the season. Nico Reganey was getting a lot of those targets in clutch moments towards the middle of the season.
Specifically, the Penn State one is, I think, the one that nobody will ever forget.
Right. And so we haven't really seen, too much of him. I think that the Northwestern game was just good for him to see him get multiple targets. You could really see the emotion with him every time he caught the ball, running really hard, visibly displaying emotion after his catches. So he's a dynamic receiver. It is disappointing to see that he hasn't been able to really break out the way that we expected him to, because he is a dynamic player. He has, all those skills that he had and all of the things that he showed redshirt freshman year is still there. He's still that same player. It's just a matter of kind of finding the right position for him. Maybe the emergence of Keegan Johnson at the X will allow for Tracy to move to different places and maybe be able to get open and to have some newer opportunities without having to kind of shoulder the responsibility of being the number one. So I'm interested to see what happens against Minnesota, but it was good to see him kind of have a multi-catch game against Northwestern. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I feel like that was his first one in a really long time.
Yeah, it was really quiet, where I think it was like less than 100 receiving yards through the first 8 games, I want to say, which is kind of unbelievable when you think about even just what he did last year to have less than 100 in that much of a stretch. So it'll be, I want to say it might have been 88 yards going into, or 89 yards. I think it might have been 89 yards through the first 8 games. I'm sure I'll be getting a note from somebody giving me the exact number. Right. So don't know it quite off the top of my head. It's somewhere in the 80s, but that's just so probably one of the bigger surprises on offense. And defensively, then kind of switching gears, the Doughboyz seem to be back in their full level of production after a couple of quiet weeks.
Right. Yeah, they've kind of seen 2 ends of a spectrum this year. With the first 6 games of the season, they were just all over the place, forcing all of these turnovers. And of course, the direct correlation between turnovers forced and success on offense. And then Purdue and Wisconsin, Purdue was a team that just threw it all over them, really challenged the secondary, had some success. Wisconsin didn't really give the secondary a chance to turn the ball over with the way that they played play style wise. But it was good to see them come back. For me, the most encouraging thing was Northwestern is one of the best teams in the conference at not giving the ball away. That's exactly what Iowa did in that game. It took the ball away and gave the opportunity to the offense to go out there and score some more points. So the good news is that Riley Moss is expected to play on Saturday. And from what my co-writer Chad Lysico was telling me, he's like a Northwestern killer. I mean, a Minnesota killer, I should say. He had like 2 interceptions his first game against Minnesota as a freshman. He seems to kind of, torment the Gophers when he's back there. So him being full tilt with Hankins reuniting as that tandem, and the emergence of Jamari Harris to know that he is a starting level cornerback. If something were to happen to Moss, Hankins, whoever, you can have someone to slide in there as they wait for Terry Roberts to come back. So the secondary being at full strength at this point in the year is critical, and I expect to see them continue to make plays with Moss back.
And Harris is a little bit of a question mark. He hadn't played a ton. I think it was like 8 games he had appeared in before this season, recording a stat, I think, in only 1 of those. And then all of a sudden you see him emerge as a very capable cornerback. He got beat on that one play against Northwestern. So that one, though, is okay. You're going to have some of those mistakes with that lack of experience, but he settled in there, first career interception. And it kind of makes you think, okay, that next generation of the Doughboyz, he could be a big piece of that.
Absolutely. 100%. That's what I was thinking. Even the Wisconsin game, they challenged him a lot early in the game. I felt like he held his own. There really weren't any plays in that Wisconsin game where there were any deep shots over the field. It was a very conservative passing game. A lot of, Iowa playing zone. A lot of those were just kind of like easy completions, kind of like gimme completions that Wisconsin was making. He really didn't get beat on too much. But that's exactly right. When I was looking at him, that game, then coming Northwestern game, seeing him do it 2 weeks in a row, I was thinking to myself, this looks like somebody who could really be cornerback 1 next year if Moss and Hankins leave. We imagine, Terry Roberts will probably be back next year, but those 2 together, I think, would be a good tandem. And then behind them, Xavier Williams, Reggie Bracey, those are going to be kind of like the guys, Cooper DeJean, those are going to be players we're watching out for next year. But I'm looking at him like, this is somebody who I can really see kind of like taking that lead spot at cornerback next year. So his development is going to be something that we're going to definitely keep an eye on. We'll see how much he plays in these upcoming weeks with Moss back, but I expect him to continue to to progress and really be kind of like that next, like you said, like leading the next generation of the Doughboyz. And I expect that nickname to kind of like maybe be like a thing now at Iowa. We'll check back on Saturday about how they're deciding to spell it. But
right now it's with a Z. But right, I like your idea of the $sign.
Right, like just literally, like, and if any players are watching this, you don't have to give me a percentage of the NIL deal. I just want the credit. But really, like, just imagine that like on a shirt, like maybe their faces, maybe their last names, and it just says Doughboyz $S. Like I can just see it. So
oh yeah, it would become almost as popular as the punting is winning shirts.
Right, exactly.
I feel like. Yes. Maybe Raygun is hearing this, and maybe Raygun, you should have that NIL offer out to the secondary there, because that'll be good. And now we know that Kirk Ferentz knows what that means with the Doughboyz.
Right.
You didn't quite get that at first. I forgot that a turnover was also a pastry.
Right.
So
yeah.
He was saying like dough, like the dough, like turnovers, and I was really confused. And then you came in clutch there.
Yeah, like I was like, no, it's money. But that was a good, that's why I kind of hesitated to say money, because I was thinking to myself, like, wow, that really does make sense. It's really just hilarious, like the age gap between like players, or even like young media members like us, and then him, to kind of like see how he thinks. And it's like obviously he's not just like up on slang like we are. So he's like, using his definitions, and it's like comparing it to ours. It's funny. But he said he was all for the nickname. He said he was all for the NIL. So the players have the green light. So
the capitalist society, as Ferentz brought up.
Right. So if we start to see those shirts, I think that would just be that'd be so cool. And I think it's kind of surprising that group, especially, and this is something that, Tory Taylor is only in his second year, but the secondary they have been doing this for years. Like, this is they have a long-standing tradition of turning the ball over in great secondary play. So it's kind of crazy that they don't have some type of nickname or calling card. I know that's not the Iowa way. I think that might have been after the Maryland game. Riley Moss was like, yeah, we don't do the turnover chains or the savage pads, or we don't do any of that stuff. We just do attaboys, and we just go back out there and do it again. So maybe that's not what they do, but there's an opportunity here for Doughboyz. They might need to make an exception for this one.
Some good money there. I don't know how you could pass up on that one. Just think about how much Tory Taylor is making off the t-shirts. And of course that's all going to charity. But that could be a good revenue source there. Right. And then defensive line wise, things seem to look pretty good against Northwestern. Granted, Northwestern isn't the fiercest offensive line they're going to go up against, but they'll have a tougher challenge with some bigger Minnesota guys. Right. I think this is such an interesting matchup, because after the Wisconsin game, Noah Shannon said that he felt like the defensive line really shot themselves short against Wisconsin. And they have a very similar opportunity against Minnesota with their huge offensive line to kind of right the wrong from that game. So I imagine they were watching a lot of that Wisconsin tape and using it as building blocks and learning experience. I think the biggest thing for the defensive line is, for the first time in several weeks, they're at full tilt for the group that they were going to have. Obviously, Ethan Hurkett went out, so they lost one lineman, and then Deontay Craig went out, and he was really showing a lot of positive strides early in the year. That kind of halted his development. So they lost two rotation guys for a line that was still young, still learning things. So Craig came back, had a tackle for loss against Northwestern, so that was an encouraging sign. So this line is as healthy as they've been in a really long time, and that's something that's gonna, I think, pay dividends for them. And a lot of younger guys like a Van Ness, like a Black, who are stepping into roles and contributing there. Right. Joe Evans made a huge play against Wisconsin. He was in there on that fourth down stop, and then he was almost unblockable against Northwestern as a pass rusher. So it was good to see him get back into the action and really emerge. And
and show that he might be probably the best pass rusher on the team of players who put their head in the ground. I know Van Valkenburg is a disruptor as well, but Evans has seemed to really be coming on these last few weeks. So they can continue to get that production out of him. Noah Shannon, obviously we know what he's bringing in the middle, and then Van Valkenburg on the other side. We can maybe see this line start to turn the corner a little bit.
Well, Kenny, got any score prediction for Saturday?
Yeah, I have. So I think the spread is 5.5. I have Iowa covering the spread. I think the over-under is 37. I'm going over. So 23-17. It's going to be a competitive game, but I think that the run game is going to get going. Padilla's going to make enough plays to win the game. Defense is going to play really strong. So going to be a highly competitive game. Two teams with a lot to play for. Kind of like the same thing on both sides. Both of them are playing for division implications, trophy on the line. Huge game. But I think the Iowa at home behind the Kennett crowd is going to pull it out in a one-possession game.
I'm almost exactly the same there, except I have them not covering 2017 Iowa. Okay. It's going to be a good one. It's kind of the perfect, kind of quintessential Big Ten West rivalry. Two teams with good defenses. The cold weather, even though this is going to seem like Hawaii compared to what a month from now will be. Right. But you got that cooler weather coming in. Two teams that like to run the ball, even though Minnesota's done it a lot more effectively than Iowa has. So it'll be a great game.
Right. And then, of course, the added level of kind of like animosity. These, the timeouts last year, leave the timeouts here, we'll take the pick with us, all those things coming into play. I mean, these are just two teams that don't like each other. It's a rivalry game, obviously. So Minnesota's going to come in highly motivated. They've lost 6 in a row. Iowa's going to want to not lose another trophy. So, something's going to have to give on Saturday, but it's going to be an amazing game, amazing day of college football. Huge opportunity for both of those teams to reinsert themselves in the national conversation as we're winding down these last few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think whichever team wins is going to be the second team in a 2-team race for the Big Ten West behind Wisconsin. So it's do or die time here. Right,
100%. This is what they said they wanted at the beginning of the year. Even after all their big wins, they said, we want to be able to be in a position where we're playing relevant football in November. The Northwestern game kind of propelled them to this point where now they're playing relevant in November. Now, the question is between them and Minnesota, they're going to be trying to answer the same question, which is who's going to take that next step forward, continue on this path of competing for a division title, and maybe whose season goes in a different direction with a loss and seemingly being out of the race at that point.
Yeah, and then looking closely at the bowl forecast to figure out which one. Do you avoid the Cheez-It Bowl? That's not one I think that has a Big Ten affiliation, but take any of the other ones there.
Right. It's interesting because I looked it up after last week's game, and I looked at 4 different websites, and they have Iowa going to 4 different bowl games. So it's literally like on like a huge spectrum. The ones I saw: Citrus, Outback, Music City, and Las Vegas. So
yeah, I saw Las Vegas one. I think was the Athletic Stuart Mandel one.
Yeah,
I saw that one in. I wouldn't mind Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas would be nice. Again, me, of course, we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast. Like, I would prefer a warm weather destination, of course. So Nashville, all due respect to the Music City Bowl in the city of Nashville, I personally wouldn't prefer that one first because this is going to be freezing at that time of year. So
Las Vegas, for a lot of Iowa people, Nashville seems really warm in comparison. So I know for somebody who understands the southern half of the country a lot better than I do, that's not actually considered warm weather.
Right. No, it's definitely not. It's going to be at that time of year near New Year's. It's going to be like 30 something high in the 40s at that time of it's going to be freezing outside. So,
okay. Yeah, I agree. Let's go farther south.
Yeah.
Citrus sounds nice.
Sunny. Right. They're going to be, some players are going to be wearing long sleeves in that game close to New Year's, but Tampa, Orlando, close to some water. Sunny day. Everybody's gonna be wearing, short sleeves. It'll be a nice break from what is going to be probably a brutal December from what I am preparing myself for.
I'll be checking in on you like on that first like -3 degree high day. That one's a fun one.
Right. Now you're gonna hit me up. I'm gonna be like, I'm cool. I'm in the house. I'm inside. Like I'm not going out. I'm not going outside today.
Well, nice full circle there. We start off with winter. We end with winter.
Right.
So hopefully your second appearance on the podcast was as good as the first.
Definitely.
And thanks for the time today.
Yeah, no, I had a great time. Like what you've been doing since you stepped into this role at the Gazette. We always have fun and good banter with each other, either availability or in the press box. So looking forward to continuing that. And I will bring that ice scraper on Saturday so we can have a good laugh about that.
Okay. And I still owe you some cheese curds. So
yes.
Maybe I'll bring those. Well, can't really bring that into the press box. We'll take care of that another time.
Yeah, we'll definitely work it out. We'll work it out.
Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
My next guest on the Hawk Off the Press podcast is Randy Johnson, the Gophers reporter for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Randy, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. No problem there. Should be fun.
Well, it seemed like things are going pretty well for the Gophers as they had that winning streak going, and then Illinois happened. What exactly went wrong there?
It just kind of a little bit of everything went wrong. It kind of seemed a little similar to their loss to Bowling Green earlier in the season. They just didn't get their offense going. They got behind early, 14-0 on the first play of the second quarter, and they just couldn't get their run game. Only produced 89 yards. 2 games before they had gone over 300 both of those games. Got beat up front. Offensive line had an uncharacteristically bad day. Gave up 6 sacks. Tanner Morgan threw a couple interceptions. One early in the game that Illinois cashed in for a touchdown. Then one at the end that ended the Gophers' last threat. They just they were forced to play out of their comfort zone, and that's one way you can beat the team is if you make them pass. If you get a lead on them. They haven't always been the best at coming back. They haven't been in that situation too often this year either.
And you're talking about that comfort zone. The comfort zone definitely seems to be running the ball, even though it's involving now some players that maybe weren't at the top of the depth chart, say a couple months ago.
Yeah, they're basically down to their 5th and 6th running backs as it would have started the season on the depth chart. They lost the reigning Big Ten running back of the year, Mo Ibrahim, in the first game, torn Achilles. They lost Trey Potts at Purdue. They lost Bryce Williams at Northwestern to a ankle injury that required surgery. They had Cam Wiley, who was probably about 4th in the depth chart going into the season. He entered the transfer portal, so they're down to a redshirt freshman Kai Thomas and a true freshman Marquise Irving, who's they're both 4-star backs and they have a lot of potential. They've shown a lot of productivity so far with back-to-back 100-yard games for both of them, but they were shut down this past week by Illinois.
Wow, there can't be too many people left in that room there at this point.
Their number 3
them
running
get
back
hurt.
right now is they took a linebacker, Derek LeCaptain, moved him over to offense, and he responded late in the Northwestern game with a 24-yard touchdown run where he basically broke 3 or 4 tackles and found the end zone.
Oh, wow. That's really getting creative there when you have your linebacker doing that. Yep. Two position athlete right there.
Yeah, he was a pretty good 2-sport athlete or basically two-way athlete in Wisconsin. It basically set the state record for total offense yards, things like that. But they got somebody there who knows how to run the ball. It's just he hasn't had a whole lot of experience at the college level.
And then quarterback Tanner Morgan's probably not a stranger to many Iowa fans after the last couple of years. Seems like he's really somebody who utilizes that run pass option a lot.
Yeah, he's been a pretty good game manager this year for him. They like to run the ball. They've run it 70% of the time this year. They like to bleed the clock, limit possessions for the opponent, and Tanner's been pretty efficient for the most part. The tough parts is when he gets put in a situation where they're forced to pass. 2 years ago, he had an outstanding year, a second team All Big Ten, and it helped immensely that he had 2 NFL caliber wide receivers there in Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson. They don't have that. They've along with the depleted running back core, they've had injuries to the wide receiver core too. Chris Altman-Bell's their best receiver's been in and out of the lineup. They've had some time missed by Daniel Jackson and Dalen Wright. So it's just a lot of inconsistencies, and it kind of caught up with them against Illinois.
And then Iowa's coming off in their last 2 games, kind of polar opposites in terms of rush defenses. They had Wisconsin, that's probably as good of a rush defense as there is in the conference. And then they go from that to Northwestern, which is about as porous of a rush defense in the conference, back-to-back weeks there. Where on that spectrum do you see Minnesota being in terms of rush defenses?
Well, Minnesota was they were very good against the rush. They were second in the conference going into the Illinois game. They gave up 150 to Illinois' good running back there. So a lot of it was early. They fell behind. They right away gave up a 49-yard drive after an interception, and then a long 84-yard drive to make it 14-0. But they stiffened up the rest of the way. They basically Illinois had half of its yards on those first 2 possessions, and the Gophers held them scoreless the rest of the way.
And then in terms of pass defense, it'll be an interesting time for Iowa's quarterback situation, with it looking as of right now that Alex Padilla is going to be the starter, but who knows? Kirk Ferentz could always pull a rabbit out of his hat between now and Saturday. So we won't be totally sure till they take the field at Kinnick. But what should Iowa fans expect to see from this Minnesota pass defense?
Well, I think it would be really important for the Gophers. Their strength is their defensive line. They rotate about 8 guys in there, and they've gotten a lot of productivity from them. If they can put some pressure on the quarterback, that'll make it the job of the secondary a lot easier. They've got 2 pretty good linebackers in Jack Gibbons and Marion Sori-Marin. They've upped their play quite a bit. They're solid pretty much all over on defense. So, the defense needs to come up pretty big, and if they could, pick off a pass or 2 or get a fumble, I mean, that would go a long way, because we all know how Iowa feasts off turnovers, and Gophers got to play pretty clean on offense to avoid that.
Yeah, saw that one with Northwestern, where the Iowa secondary that calls themselves the Doughboyz are kind of back there with the 3 interceptions. It is funny, Kirk Ferentz, I asked him about that, and he thought that is Doughboyz because of the turnover, like the pastry. And then we had to say, no, not that.
Funny.
No, money. Other dough. Special teams wise, it looks like Minnesota's had a punter that's kind of settled in after maybe a rocky start to the year.
Yeah, Mark Crawford's been pretty good lately. He's done a good job. Flipped the field a couple times. He's decent pinning opponents down inside their 20. That's been a bit of a strength in the special teams. Kicking game a little bit not so much there. They've last week it hurt them. Matthew Trickett missed a 45-yard field goal, then an extra point. Their regular kickoff man, Dragan Kesic, was out last week because of injury. Trickett took over there and did fine with a couple touchbacks. But yeah, that they need reliability from the kicking game.
Well, it'll certainly be an interesting matchup in terms of seeing who takes home the bronze pig, which when it's a rivalry involving a bronze pig, it's a true Midwestern Big Ten game right there. Randy, thanks for the time.
Yep, thank you.
And thank you to the listeners for tuning into another episode. I'll be back with an edition of After the Final Score after Saturday's game. Until then, we will talk Hawks later.